So now we're in the back end of November and 2025 is finally coming to an end. I've had a chance to reflect on this last year and I realised something very strange has happened. In 2025, I've covered more miles and lifted more weight, hitting lifetime PBs both in the gym and with my running, all whilst knocking on the door of being 30 and working a job that regularly screws with my sleep and recovery. But what stood out to me was the fact that I've basically spent this last year training harder than I've ever done before in my life. By far, hitting two disciplines that most people would say don't naturally complement one another. And in these last 12, even 18 months, I've stayed injury-free. Like, completely injury-free. So this situation that I found myself in is pretty novel for me, because in my first year of hybrid training, it was the complete opposite. I had pretty much every injury in the book, especially from the running side of things. So Achilles tendonitis, shin splints, hamstring tendonitis, IT band issues, and my least favourite of the lot, a stress fracture in my metatarsal. But in the last 18 months, I've been a lot more proactive when it comes to my recovery and have made a handful of key changes which have aggregated together to make me a more resilient athlete. And I reckon that I can summarise all of them in the space of a short YouTube video. How convenient. And at the end of the video, I'll touch a little bit on how I go about managing an injury if I were to get one now, which I feel will be extremely likely as soon as I press publish on this video, because that's just how irony works, isn't it? But anyway, I'll be drawing on my experience both as an amateur athlete and also as a medical doctor. So, for context, here's my upcoming week of training. And this is a pretty standard week for me, where I run maybe 5 or 6 days and lift weights 2 to 3 times. On balance right now, I'm probably pushing my running a little bit harder than I am my lifting. That's just because I've got some more fixed term goals when it comes to my running. So trying to go under 18 minutes in the 5K, my second attempt trying to do so, and also trying to go under 3 hours at London Marathon next year. And that's all whilst being a 6'1" bloke who weighs 87 kilograms. So I'm not your typical marathon runner's build. Whereas in the gym, I'm still pushing myself, but I'm only really hitting those major movements. So competition style squat, bench press and deadlift once a week as it stands. But today is Tuesday, so as you might have seen in my program, it's a double training day. So I'm gonna head to the gym and it's gonna be a tough session to start the week. So first off, just to get something straight, the vast majority of non-traumatic sporting injuries have their origin in the fact that you might have weak soft tissues, i.e. tendons, ligaments and muscles. And the way that you can improve the strength of these structures is to do some strength training. There used to be a myth floating around that I'd hear all the time that runners should be doing extremely lightweight for really high rep sets, like 30 plus reps in a set, with the idea that that was more specific to the sport of running and would make you better. But no, doing more running is specific to running and will make you a better runner. Strength training is for building strength. And lifting weights, where you can easily do dozens and dozens of reps, where your cardiovascular system is the limiting factor, that's not strength training. That's just cardio. Right, enough dawdling, Andrew. Let's actually get after this. So obviously you don't need to identify as a powerlifter in order to become a more resilient runner, but most of my training principles that I focus on with my compound lifts strengthen the very structures that used to give out when I got injured. So building strong glutes, hamstrings and quads are going to protect you from a wide range of injuries that affect the structures that cross the joints that all those muscles work at. So I focus on doing between 3 and 5 sets of 4 to 12 reps with almost all my movements in the gym, working with weights heavy enough that I approach failure without going all the way. Unlike running, I think that pretty much all injuries in the gym are preventable, and regularly working to absolute failure with heavy compound lifts is just asking for trouble. But injury prevention in the gym is literally proper form, brace your core, and listen to your body. Right, time for some bench press. So I had shoulder surgery back in 2019, and there was a period where I was really worried that I would never bench, at least at the heights that I used to back when I was at university. But through weight training, rebuilding back all the structures in the shoulder joint, especially the rotator cuff, here I am, back to my best. But yeah, I'm not going to pretend that bench press is actually preventing injury in any way. This is just part of my session, so I'll add it onto the video. 4 sets of 6 with 110 kilos. So just made it back to the car, grabbed myself a coffee on the way out of the gym because still got a running workout to come and need to keep those energy levels nice and high. But I do have one last point to make on the whole strength training side of things, and then I promise I will move on. But I think that it's pretty telling that the few niggles that I have had over this last year have been primarily around my foot and my ankle. And I'm pretty sure that's because at times I've been known, like most other people, to neglect the exercises which move the structures which surround my foot and my ankle, i.e. dorsiflexions and plantarflexions, so calf raises and tibialis raises. So with only strength training program, which does also have a secondary purpose to prevent injuries, especially when it comes to running, it does need to be hugely complicated, but it should involve exercises which cover pretty much every major joint, especially in the lower body. And this video for me is a good reminder to pull myself together and start doing my calf raises. So back from the gym, and just wanted to take a quick moment to address the elephant in the room, and that is the sponsor of today's video. It's not Starbucks, it's Gymshark. So as some of you might already know, a couple of weeks ago, Gymshark reached out to me and asked whether or not I'd be interested in partnering with them. And I said, absolutely, hell yeah, where do I sign? I was a little bit more professional than that, but that's the long and short of it. But my initial reaction was pretty genuine because I honestly do believe that Gymshark have some of the best workout apparel in the game. And nowadays they've got loads of different ranges covering the worlds of weightlifting, general conditioning, running, as well as lifestyle stuff too. I've been loving the kit that they've sent me to try out so far, and as someone that runs and lifts weights, they've got both bases covered. And in case you didn't know already, they're currently in the middle of one of their biggest sales of the year so far, the Black Friday sale, with discounts up to 50% off across the entire website, and an extra 10% off when you use my unique code Andrew10 and follow the link down below in the description. And what I've just told you there was correct up until first thing this morning, where I got another email from Gymshark saying that that 10% discount code has been upgraded. It is now officially a 25% discount code on top of already discounts of up to 50% across the entire Gymshark website. So if you haven't already, head on over to the Gymshark website, and otherwise, back to the video. Right, I'm starving, time for some lunch. So next up, I want to talk a little bit about some of the lifestyle factors that I think have made a big difference in preventing me from getting as many injuries. But over the last couple of years, I've become a lot more intentional about things like my diet, how much alcohol I drink, and how much sleep I try to get each night. So I try and eat predominantly home-cooked meals consisting of whole foods, lots of fruit, vegetables, protein, and try and limit the amount of ultra-processed foods that I consume day to day. I still drink alcohol occasionally, but it's pretty much exclusively limited to social occasions, and even then it's very rare for me to have anything more than 3 or 4 drinks across an entire fortnight. And when it comes to my sleep, I'm pretty dialed in, and I try to go to bed at the same time every night, lights out normally before 11 o'clock, which ensures I'm getting at least 7 hours every single night, because I usually wake up between 6 or 7 in the morning. I've even started wearing a sleep ring at night time, which I appreciate is probably overkill and is certainly not necessary. But what it does do is it gives me a score as to the quality of sleep that I'm getting each night. And that score by itself doesn't mean a whole lot, but what it lets me do is compare one night's sleep with another, and it lets me think about the factors that I can control within my day which might improve my sleep next time. And when I think about why I'm a more resilient athlete now than I used to be, there's not one single reason. Like, of course, eating a healthy diet and getting a good night's sleep is going to be better for my recovery than the opposite. But in saying that, I can't draw a direct causative link between the fact that I sleep 20 minutes longer on average and eat more lentils than I used to the fact that I don't have runner's knee anymore. But in the same way that I used to lift weights back when I was getting all these injuries, I also was sleeping fairly well and ate a decent amount of protein and vegetables most of the time. So none of the changes that I've made are magic bullets in and of themselves. But it was only when I aggregated lots of these small changes together consistently with a specific focus that I started to notice a shift in my outcomes. So regular structured strength training instead of just turning up and going through the motions, and being more intentional with my food and sleep instead of just mindlessly carrying old habits forward. Right, on to my next point, and if I show you a graph of my running mileages from 2023-24, can you guess where I might have suffered a stress fracture and why? Yep, it was in December after a pretty ill-fated 60-kilometre solo ultramarathon. So the temptation here is to blame the injury on that event itself, and I suppose in this extreme example, you wouldn't be entirely wrong. But for most non-traumatic injuries, the root cause is often not to be found in the moment the injury happened or when you first noticed it. It's in what came before, or in my case, what didn't come before is probably more accurate. But basically, at that point in my life, I was veering from one event to the next, without ever having taken the time to build up the necessary number of miles in training to prepare my body for the very repetitive and strenuous exercise that is running. As a beginner runner, I maybe average between 10 and 20 kilometers each week, so it would only require a relatively small deviation in this weekly intensity or mileage to have an over-exaggerated effect on my fatigue or injury risk. For example, a few years ago, I chose to run a max effort hilly park run with basically no prior experience of doing fast hill sprints. And the next day, I noticed a pain in my right knee. And this pain stuck around for months and months. And this was my first experience of runner's knee. And initially, my reaction was to focus on the event itself. And I thought I should pretty much never run a fast hill sprint ever again. But hills weren't the problem, it was my approach to dealing with training volume that was the problem. Like, that intense 5k hilly effort was a huge training stimulus compared with what I could actually tolerate as a novice runner at the time, who exclusively ran on flat terrains. Unfortunately, I learned the hard way that making your body more resilient requires time, patience, and most of all, consistency. Because although my heart and my muscles could adapt relatively quickly to new stimuli, everything else takes a lot longer to catch up, and doing too much too soon will inevitably lead to a whole string of overuse injuries in your tendons and ligaments. So in preparation for my recent half marathon, where I got a lifetime PB of under 1 hour 25 minutes, I did temporarily up my weekly mileage from 50 to over 70 kilometers, but I did so in small chunks of 5k extra each week. You can also do something pretty similar with your big compound lifts in the gym, where you look at how much weight, reps and sets you did in a particular movement one week, and make sure that you don't increase that number by more than 10% for the following week. I think when you get hooked on a new hobby, like I did a couple of years ago when I first got into hybrid training, it's very natural to want to race ahead with your training volume, because I wanted to be fitter and stronger at the same time, like straight away. But ultimately, I learned through trial and error that this was counterproductive, because it led to plateaus, stalled progress, and even having to take a few steps backwards because of injuries. But look at this progress now, come on, way fewer peaks and troughs, just steady progressive overload. So it's a new day, and before I get on to talking about how I would address an injury if I were to get one now, I want to go through a few different quickfire points, because although I definitely believe that optimizing lifestyle factors, managing your volume and strength training are the three most important things that have kept me healthy over these last 12 to 18 months, I often get a lot more specific questions in the comments on these videos. So what I've done is that I've sort of wrapped up a lot of those questions into a few common themes, which I'll get to now. So first off, why don't I have dedicated recovery days? Well, this week, in fact, I actually did, if you check back at the program that I showed you at the start of the video. But these questions are probably in response to my hybrid training split video that I did at the start of the year. And in that video, I basically showed an ideal template of how I would train in a week if work wasn't a limiting factor. But because of work, and especially my on-call shifts, I'm often forced into doubling up my sessions onto off days, which sort of gives me an unintended day of recovery. But also, when you're relatively well trained, which I would now consider myself to be, recovery doesn't always mean doing nothing. I think it's a very individual choice, but if you feel like other aspects of your recovery are on point and you're pretty well accustomed to your current training volume, then a full day off to do absolutely nothing is not always necessary. But if that doesn't sound like you, or you feel particularly beat up in the middle of a busy training week, then obviously take a flipping day off. So next up, what do I do for stretching and mobility? So surprisingly little, actually. Usually I do some dynamic stretches before my workouts, and then I do static stretches, particularly of my lower body after most runs or gym sessions, but like 5 to 10 minutes tops. But to be honest with you, right now I'm not currently trying to get any more flexible than I am already, and that's because 1, I can perform all my movements and lifts in the gym through a full range of movement, and when I run fast I don't feel like my stride length is a limiting factor. And 2, I don't have any major asymmetrical imbalances when it comes to my flexibility from one side to the other. But if that's not the case for you, then for sure, I would definitely recommend that you try and improve your flexibility. But most of the risk of injury when it comes to being particularly inflexible is from having stiff or uncompliant soft tissues, which get exposed when you try and excessively load them through the more extreme ranges of movement, which once again, you can address by doing progressive strength training through a full range of movement. Not to sound like a broken record. Right, warm-ups. What do I do to warm up? Nothing particularly complicated. So a little bit of gentle mobilization and some dynamic stretches before my easy runs, a few easy kilometers and then some strides before my harder runs, and then a handful of warm-up sets and again some dynamic stretches before my working sets in the gym. Not exactly groundbreaking stuff. Occasionally I will do a little bit of foam rolling or use a massage gun, but all this really does is reduce your perception of muscle stiffness and soreness, rather than actively warming you up or breaking up any myofascial tension or any crap like that. The way they work is the same mechanism that when you bang your leg on a table and you give it a rub afterwards, it feels better. You haven't actually fixed anything. That being said, psychology is a big aspect of your performance, so I do often whack out the massage gun before a big and particularly scary session. So I get so many questions on this topic from people who already lift and want to get into running, but how do I run after days when I've done squats? So my training program is pretty much dictated by when my lower body strength work is and when my harder running sessions are, and I try and separate these all by at least 48 hours. Upper body sessions and easy runs can fit in anywhere. And then as you've seen, I don't really tend to do big leg days in the gym. I pretty much exclusively do back squats and deadlifts with very few accessories when it comes to my lower body work, and this helps keep my total training volume relatively light and helps reduce DOMS or muscle stiffness. But honestly, it does just take some getting used to. I often feel like I couldn't run on my legs at all, they are that stiff, and then after 1 to 2 kilometers, they feel absolutely fine. How do I manage my recovery around night shifts? And I'm afraid I don't really have any great insights here. It's not like I've been able to hack my sleep pattern when it comes to doing nights. All I can say is that in general, I try and stick to my regular meal time. So breakfast, a late lunch usually after I've woken up, and then dinner before I go to work or maybe just after I've arrived. And then usually when I'm actually on the shift itself, I don't have more than just a simple snack or just some hot drinks. I do still try and work out most days in a run of night shifts, but I mainly stick to upper body work in the gym or easy runs. And that's largely so that I don't have to play catch up later in the week, but it also helps with my sleep and also returning me to a normal sleep pattern once the run is finished. So on to my final point, and this is about prehab. So I get loads of questions about this on my YouTube videos, and I have spoken a little bit about this in some of my older videos, but I fear that I might have been perhaps a little bit misleading when I've tried to explain it in the past. But I used to do a fair amount of physio-prescribed exercises, which focused on strengthening some of the smaller groups of muscles in my lower body. And this was in response to having seen a physio for my IT band issues and hamstring tendinopathies in the past. And when I recovered from those initial injuries, I continued doing these exercises and stopped calling it rehab and started describing it as prehab, which might have been misleading in the sense that I was telling everybody that they might benefit from doing a similar program of exercises. So just to clarify my current take, if you are right now in a state of health, I would just focus on general strength training, working both the flexors and extensors across all the major joints, especially in your lower body, and also maybe doing some occasional unilateral work to make sure you're not developing any major asymmetries or muscular imbalances. And I probably won't worry too much about any of the more niche exercises unless you've been directed to do them by a physio after an actual consultation. So as you probably started to realise by now, my program for preventing injury is by no means perfect. I could definitely be spending more time on mobility, on warming up, on running specific strength training. My diet could be cleaner, and once again, I'm back on night shifts again tonight. But that's all part of being an amateur athlete, and at the end of the day, I just need to focus on what's going to give me the biggest bang for my buck. So I'm almost certain that at some point in the future, possibly the near future, I will get another injury, and I need to plan ahead as to how I would approach dealing with one of those injuries. And just to be clear, I'm talking about minor soft tissue injuries here, no grade 4 tendon ruptures or broken bones. So with most injuries being due to overtraining, over-reliance on weak or inflamed tissues, or inadequate recovery, it would make sense to first look at what you were doing in the months before an injury and have an honest think about what you might do differently next time. Then the old advice of rest, ice, compress and elevate is an okay starting point, but all that really does is act to ease the pain associated with acute inflammation rather than actually getting you back to training any faster. So once any significant swelling settled down, we're on to the next stage. And here I'd have a period of time where you reduced your total training volume and worked at pretty low intensities before slowly building back up to where you were before. A great rule of thumb is that if the injury causes you anything more than mild pain or discomfort when doing the activity, anything more than a 2 or 3 out of 10 on the pain scale, you should probably not be doing that activity and instead find ways to scale it back. And keep an eye on how you feel after a workout. If your pain flares massively afterwards and doesn't settle within 48 hours, you've probably done too much too soon and you need to ease off again or even see a professional. And regarding the over-reliance on the specific structure that you've injured, you need to slowly strengthen the muscles and other soft tissues in the joint that structure crosses. So for an Achilles flare, we're talking graded training of all the muscles that cross the ankle, so that in future they can bear some of the load of the exercise, but also so that you can apply gentle stress to the ligaments and tendons in a way that's going to stimulate a remodeling process and eventually make a stronger structure. In the past, I've been known to try and stretch away my Achilles tendonitis, and I promise you this is not the answer. It's only going to make things more sore. It's unlikely that you developed an Achilles tendinopathy because you didn't stretch enough in the first place, more that the muscles that connect to that tendon weren't strong enough to actually bear the forces going through it. And just to be clear, I'd always recommend seeing a professional if you're unsure about the specific injury you're dealing with, or things haven't been getting better despite you doing all the right stuff. At the end of the day, I am just some random bloke on YouTube. I'm not a specialist and I don't know anything about your specific circumstances. This is just how I would approach dealing with a minor soft tissue injury. People often joke that injuries take up to 12 weeks to fully resolve, or about 3 months if you see a physio. So don't expect physiotherapy to radically fix your injury in most cases. The importance of physio is that you can stop things from getting worse, and you can hopefully build back stronger so that it's less likely to happen next time, if you actually follow their advice. But that's everything for today, guys. A slightly longer video than I'd originally anticipated, but I hope it provided a useful insight into my approach to all things recovery and injury related. But I am always interested to hear what you guys think, so let me know down in the comments about any thoughts you had on the video or any approaches that have worked for you. So subscribe for more running, lifting and general fitness content, and I'll see you again next time.